We'd like to welcome you all. We wanted to have a Meet the Candidate night where we were going to talk about the special election coming up and meet some of the candidates, and so you can have a chance to ask them some questions. And without further ado,
So I'm Stephen Williams. I live in Casa de Amigos and been here for several years.
You are going to have to pump it up.
Okay, I will pump it up.
Let people stand in the middle of the talking so that there's not the competition.
All right. So I decided to run partly because of what's going on here at PDR, and partly because of some predatory towing things going on that affected me and neighbors. And just a week or two ago, I had to help a neighbor in that kind of situation. They were in a standoff, and it was interesting. And additionally, as I looked into the city and opportunities, I started noticing more and more things that are gaps or opportunities of where we could do something a lot better. So I have something that I think we can implement really very easily and quickly is something like a bus rapid transit system. Like after living here, I ride my bike a lot and line skate and do other things. I've got my e-bike out there. I think it's still out there. And but
They didn't tell me.
that's right. I'm watching. Got my eye on it. But you know, Sunnyvale is it's a really wonderful city, but we really have these islands that are very separated. So here in North Sunnyvale, you pretty much have to drive to get anywhere unless you want to go to Mountain View on VTA or downtown San Jose, right? There's bus service, but it's really slow and it meanders all over the place, and it's just not suitable unless you have a lot of time. So I think there's some big opportunities for bus rapid transit. I think the Eastern Channel over here, I've realized would be an amazing, what I call bike highway, bicycle highway, that we could add a few overpasses and basically have nonstop bike traffic off the roads that would go from, north of 237 all the way past El Camino. And so I think that's an amazing opportunity we really should push for. And they're in the process of redoing all the culverts for runoff. So if they redo the culverts and we don't try to make this happen, they'll say, well, we already spent the money, we can't do anything. So I think we might have a window here where we could say, well, let's spend a little bit more and make all that land usable. And I think generally, Sunnyvale has not, part of the reason we have the towing issue is that Sunnyvale hasn't made sure that we had enough parking everywhere. So it's bad here, it's bad in some of the new condos that are over on Fair Oaks, and they have a similar problem. And those were just built, so it's really a problem. And so we need to find some additional parking, kind of infill, and potentially using that part of that land. So yeah, I have a number of ideas I think that we should work on. It'd be great if I'm get elected to city council, I'll definitely work on it there. If I'm not, I'll find another way to work on it. So thank you very much.
thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, my name's Larry Klein. I've been very active in the city for the last 15 years. I've been 9 years on the Planning Commission, 6 years on the Board for the Historical Society. I've been on other nonprofits like the Board for Charles Street Garden, Full Circle Farm, other committees, Stevens Street Trail Extension, the Charter Review Committee. So I've been very active in the city for the last 15 years, and I feel like I'm best prepared to fill the open seat that's on City Council right now. So I decided last year that I was going to run for Dave Whittam's open seat that was going to be term limited at the end of 2016, and then he ended up resigning earlier this year, which caused this whole special election. So, as much as the city's wasting $760,000 of the city's money, it's not my fault. It's not Stephen's fault. It's not John's fault. We were all running for conceivably the November seat, and then the special election caused the issue as far as, we have to run, somebody has to run, somebody has to fill that seat. And I feel that I'm basically best qualified to immediately hit the ground running and fill that seat on City Council. I've been working directly with community leaders and city staff for many, many years, and I have a good understanding of how the city operates. As far as my priorities, the number one priority for me is finishing the downtown. It's the heart and soul of the community, and once it's complete, then we can start looking at, you know, the sales tax that comes in can then be applied to deal with all these other programs, like, you know, helping to fix transportation, helping to fix, you know, a lot of the different things, the parks. You know, there's so many things that just having additional money to use would actually be very, very worthwhile. Second thing, of course, is affordable housing. So I have a lot of different plans that I've tried to push through while I was on Planning Commission. And I have, you know, it's like one thing we can change the secondary living unit laws within the city so that, you know, a lot of the single family homes that are south of El Camino, if we change the secondary living unit, the granny unit laws, that we'd allow granny units on smaller lots, they could build conceivably smaller units, 400, 500 square foot units at the rear of the property. And as opposed to a lot of like the senior people that are retiring and selling their homes and completely moving out of the area, they can conceivably downsize on their same property and move to basically the granny unit and then rent out the front house. So they wouldn't actually have to leave their community, wouldn't have to leave their neighborhoods. Too often developers basically buy several homes, tear them down, and build a row of duplexes, and changes the characteristics of that neighborhood. And so what this basically allows is, you know, to do infill housing kind of spread throughout that community, but the neighborhood still looks the same. You know, you walking down the street and you really can't tell. You know, I live in the Heritage District, and when we moved in, somebody had previously built a granny unit behind there, and we've had it rented since day one when we moved in. It's always been under market. You know, we rented to a teacher and his wife who was a yoga instructor. We rented to, you know, someone who worked in the Parks Department in Mountain View. And it was, you know, it is affordable, it's semi-affordable housing, because the developers right now try to build as big a units as they can. So it's like all the code within the city is based upon units per acre, but it has no concept of the size of that unit. So they build 3, 4, 5 bedroom units. But when semi-affordable housing would be a studio or a 1 bedroom of, you know, 400, 500, 600 square feet. And that wouldn't be, you know, that would help actually dealing with some of the issues as far as, you know, the middle income people that are having to share apartments with 3 or 4 other people just because they can't pay the rent by themselves. So that's one of the things from an affordable housing standpoint. We could raise the below market rate for sale housing. We could add more basically density at the transit center, so Caltrain, the Lawrence station and the Murphy station. So there's things that could be done from an affordable housing, and of course we'll talk about rent stabilization later. I'm sure that'll be one of the questions, so we'll get into that a little bit later. And then lastly, of course, is traffic. So I've been on the Planning Commission. I've said no on multiple projects that ultimately have gotten approved when they went on to council. But traffic is the issue that I hear most when I talk to the citizens, and it's not one. There's not one specific project that's caused it. It's kind of an ongoing increase that's affected the region, and it's not just Sunnyvale. It's like there's only a certain percentage of the traffic that originates here and ends here. So it's people coming to work here. It's people that are living here that are leaving. But there's also a certain amount of pass-through traffic that people are passing through Sunnyvale to go to Cupertino, to go to Mountain View, to go to Santa Clara, and that's also affecting our traffic. So we need, a citywide traffic plan, as well as, to push alternate transportation. I was on the Stevens Creek Trail Joint Cities extension, so there's 22 acres, basically right next to 85. That's a city land and Mountain View land that could easily be opened up, and they extend a trail through there. There's, as Stephen said, there's the east and west channels. There's other opportunities to create bicycle trails that are away from traffic. And then, of course, there's actually a shuttle program that the city's trying starting next year. It'll be a 2-year temporary program in Peary Park that will cover from 101 to El Camino, Mary to Fair Oaks, that during the daytime, during the morning hours and the afternoon, it'll be transportation from the Caltrain station into Peary Park for the people working in those office parks. And then during the daytime, it'll be an on-call service for the people living in that area to have them picked up. And it won't be like a standard VTA bus. It'll be a shorter bus, and it'll go to a specific corner. And then it would be able to take them to downtown, to El Camino, to Caltrain. So, you know, the biggest issue with public transportation, the main reason why people don't use it is it either doesn't go where you want it to go, or you can't walk to it. If you have to drive to public transportation, 90% of the people won't take that extra effort. And so this is, you know, so the city is working with, the VTA is working with businesses to try to make a program that if it works, they could easily expand it to be more like the Marguerite in Palo Alto, if you know about that, or the Mountain View shuttle, although that's more of a route base. So we'll see how that works out. So, you know, I have a wealth of knowledge of what the city's been doing in the past, and I have a lot of ideas on how the city could be improved. And, you know, that's one of the main reasons I'm running for city council. You know, it's like, I think I could take my knowledge, you know, there's a certain land use knowledge that I've had over 9 years of experience on the planning commission that is lacking in city council. You know, definitely, I've been somewhat taken aback by recommendations made by planning commission that council has then changed their mind on and basically went the exact opposite way, and I'm hoping I can correct that. I'm hoping that I can convince my other council members to do the right thing, and you know, I think that ultimately I hope to get your vote in August so that you know, I can go to council and hit the ground running and try to do what's best for the citizens of Sunnyvale. Thank you.
Hi, hello everybody. I come from a different background than Larry. Instead of the planning commission, I came out of a neighborhood association. So we live on Matilda and Maud, just the other side of the 101 here. So we were severely impacted by the LinkedIn building. So I got involved with our neighborhood association. I was chair there for 3 years. It's an elected position. I actually walked us through the whole process of becoming a 501c4 organization, so we could actually collect money and spend money and get grants. So I kind of it's just some of a small example of all my engagement as far as being active in the neighborhood and representing voters like you. I mean, I've been listening to the stories of our 1,200 homeowners on the other side of Lawrence, 101 for quite a while now. I'm very aware of the issues around mobile home parks. I have friends that are in the Winchester Ranch Park that are getting forced out. Right across the road is the Fair Oaks Manor Park. They came to us as their neighbors and said, please, can you help us know that this landlord's raising around $100 every quarter, what can we do? So we try to help connect them with the city. So I've been very aware of what the issues are around the mobile home parks and trying to help neighbors, protect neighbors. In addition to that neighborhood, more recent experience, I'm on the Bicycle Pedestrian Commission. That's where I was this evening. I apologize for being a little late. We're running a commission meeting where we're working on the master bicycle plan for the next 10 years. So we're trying to figure out how do we do biking and walking for the next 10 years. One of the things that relates to everybody in this room is part of that is we're coming up with a Vision Zero plan for the city, which is how do we ensure that everybody can cross every street safely, right? The Vision Zero plan is geared around anytime somebody's killed or seriously injured in an accident, how do we re-engineer that? So hopefully it's, you know, that never happens again. The idea is 0 fatalities, 0 serious injuries at intersections. So that's one of the ideas that the Bicycle Planning Commission came up with that we're pushing forward. Very much, I'm also on the age-friendly cities team. We're trying to get Sunnyvale qualified as an age-friendly city. And the intent of that is that everybody from age 8 to 80, right? We want to design facilities, a senior center, the rec center, city hall, so that it's friendly for everybody from age 8 to 80. And obviously part of that is how you get to those things safely, right? Whether it's with bicycling or walking, or you need transit to be provided by the city as far as a shuttle or some service like that. Our roads have kind of hit the capacity of what we can do. So the number one issue I ran on was roads. I really think that, or excuse me, it's not roads, not building more roads, but it's how do we get people around without building more roads, right? So how do we get more people into the space that we have? Obviously part of that is a lot more shuttles. Almost all the expenses of shuttles is already taxpayer supported by your sales tax. That's where most of the VTA money comes from, very little from the fare box. So we should be making the most of this and making it easier and getting more and more shuttles around so that people can get around a lot easier. I'm really glad, and Larry and I both very much in favor of the shuttle that's coming to Perry Park. Again, that will serve my neighborhood. We're the ones right across the road from that, so when that shuttle's done transporting commuters, it will come over and hopefully pick up people in Snail and take them downtown to shop and go to the restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. But that should be just the beginning of the tip of an iceberg, right? You know, Sunnyvale's got to get more serious about how we solve our transportation problems. We don't have a transportation committee. you know, we've kind of abandoned this to the VTA to say transportation is the county's job instead of the cities, and I think it's time for the cities to take it back. Just like the cities took back the responsibility of doing our own energy, right? We used to rely on PG&E. Now Sunnyvale has formed the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority. We're taking back responsibility for how we do our power, our electricity grid, right? We're going to go buy our own clean power, sell it to our residents. We don't have to pay PG&E profit margins. You'll get cleaner energy for less money than you're getting right now with PG&E. Those are the kind of examples where we can kind of take back control from other organizations and bring it back into the city where we can do more. I have 20 odd years of environmental experience. I've been an environmental activist my whole life. I've been in Sunnyvale, active in Sunnyvale environmentally since 2005 when we formed the Sunnyvale Cool team to try and get Sunnyvale past the Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. And since then, we worked on the plastic bag ban. We worked on increasing recycled water use. We worked on green building standards. So I have a wide knowledge of different environmental issues that are important to all the residents. Right? We need to do more about traffic again because it's a major source of greenhouse gases in our city. 40% of our greenhouse gases are coming from the traffic. So again, we got to get people out of their cars if we're going to tackle that problem. The clean electricity is going to tackle the other major cause, right? By cleaning up the grid, that's our other major cause of greenhouse gases. And then cleaning up the transportation is going to be a big chunk. Right? So tackling traffic is the number one thing for me. After that, affordable housing, right? We've got to make it possible for people to stay here. That's why I'm the candidate that came out, first brought up the issue of we need rent stabilization. I was clear from my friends in Winchester Ranch that we need to protect the mobile home parks, and I was clear from the people in Fair Oaks Manor that we need this rent stabilization, right? We need some way to protect these residents here. I understand half your people are on fixed income, right? You're getting 1% COLA raises, and you can't live with 7 or 8% increases, right? So I'm in favor of it. I believe Larry's in favor of it as well, but where we differ is I think it's the city's responsibility. If you guys want to try and do it during the ballot measure, there's three big downsides to that. One is you got to wait till the 2018 ballot because you won't qualify by the 2016 ballot. So you're going to have to wait 2.5 years to do it. Yeah. If it's done by ballot measure, you have to go convince the rest of the city to pass it. So how effective do you think you're going to be as a community to go to the rich and the other side of Sunnyvale and all those homeowners that don't care about mobile home parks, that they should help protect you? And once it's done by ballot measure, the only way to change is with another ballot measure. So if it's a little bit screwed up, like we're having with another ballot measure that I won't mention, it's a big deal and it's a big problem to change. So I think it's a much better solution is if you keep the pressure on the city council to pass an ordinance to protect you. You don't have to wait as long, it's easier to change, and you can go forward that way. The other things I want to do for affordable housing is I want to increase the developer fees. Right now, Sunnyvale's are low compared to other cities north of us. As far as the impact fees, we charge them. So if we collect more money, we have more money to subsidize like charity housing, amendments like homes, housing, to build more affordable housing. And one of the other things I want to change is the Perry Park, the area that we're talking about between Matilda and 85 and Central Expressway and 101. Right now, that's zoned to stay and become much more dense industrial. We don't need any more industrial towers in Sunnyvale, right? We don't need more office parks. I want to rezone that all to housing, right? We could do a planned community, we could put it in a park, we could put it in a school. Instead, right now the city council and the first plan that came out for that is continuing to keep it all much more dense housing, or excuse me, much more dense office space. As a matter of fact, the environmental impact report came out and said the amount of vehicle miles traveled to get people in and out of there because there's so many more people, is going to double, right? So if we're trying to cut our greenhouse gases and reduce traffic, putting together and approving a plan that says we're going to double the amount of traffic going in and out of that park just doesn't make any sense, right? Because it's going to be coming from everywhere and it's going to be affecting everybody. In addition to mobile home park rent stabilization, I think the same, I'm in favor of the same for the apartment dwellers, right? We're seeing that problem too. All kinds of apartment dwellers are getting forced out because of unregulated and uncontrolled rent increases. So, Mountain View has 2 ballot measures this fall. San Mateo has a ballot measure. It's happening all around the Bay. Everybody's getting forced out. So Sunnyvale, again, needs to be considering a ballot measure to protect renters from unjust rent increases and unjust terminations of leases, right? So that's another area where I think we should be doing something else. Community engagement, I think Sunnyvale needs to be doing a lot better job of reaching out to neighbors and communicating with you than we've been doing in the past. We did a major change this year with polling, But one of the things, so there's a lot more polls and a lot more ways for the city to collect input. But one of the things I think that we really ought to do a lot better is allow you to call in, right? We don't want to have to force residents to come down to City Hall to see the planning commission meeting or to talk to them, right? You should be able to call in on the phone, hey, you know, this is what I think about the project that's going to be 2 houses down from my house. Why should you have to come down to City Hall to have to do that? All right. Background-wise, in addition to all that environmental work, I'm also been a church leader, so I'm very much involved with taking care of the homeless. I volunteered at the cold winter shelter that's been here, and I volunteer with the men's rotating shelter in our church, so I'm very compassionate and care about the homeless community. And one of the things I really want to work on is the county's plan to get to 0 homeless by 2020. I think with a little bit more funding and a lot more cooperation, we can get there. Thank you. So the question is, what are your feelings on developer fees and how they're structured in Sunnyvale and what we should be doing about them? So Sunnyvale has a large list of variety of fees. There's traffic impact fees, there's park dedication fees, connection fees, so there's a lot of fees. But on average, Sunnyvale just implemented new fees of $17 a square foot for residential development and for commercial development. The studies that we did to say how much those new structures cost the city range between $60 and $80 a square foot. Right, so when these buildings go in, right, they cause a major impact to the city. Either the roads, the police officers needed, the fire department needed, new electricity grid, all that stuff. So unfortunately, there seems to be this competition between cities that they're all afraid to raise the fees too high because then they think the developers won't come here and they'll go somewhere else. And that seems like a good idea to me based on where we are right now. So, you know, Sunnyvale's just last year passed their fees at $17 a square foot. I was at that city council meeting and urged the city council to start at $27 a square foot. Palo Alto's at 30, looking to go to 50.
Right.
You know, I don't think anybody around here thinks we need more high-density development for commercial offices. We got way more. We have a horrible jobs to housing imbalance, which is a lot of what's causing all the traffic problems. So I'm in favor of however quickly we can raise the fees to slow down the rate of growth. One of the things is Moffett Park is about done. We did 8 years worth of, in 8 years they developed 24 million square feet, which is what they thought they would develop in 20 years. So that thing just went, it has exploded, you know, and who knows how many thousands and thousands of new employees are in there, or going to be once it's all getting big, because some of it's still being built. Right? So again, we haven't charged the fees we need to put the infrastructure in place. And to me, a lot of that money should be in traffic impact fees, going to put in new bike lanes and pay for shuttles, right? People shouldn't have to pay for shuttles, the businesses should help provide most of the cost.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sure. So yes, I'm also in favor of increasing the fees, but the city does take, compared to some of the cities up and down the peninsula, and Santa Clara is just like a perfect example. Sunnyvale does take a good amount of fees, and so we did increase the fees $17 a square foot for like the office space last year. But there's other fees. So you have a traffic mitigation fee, you have a housing mitigation fee, and that housing mitigation fee goes into a fund to help basically give money to non-affordable housing nonprofits. So they basically, the city helps fund them with grants in order to basically build affordable housing. So you've probably heard about Aduina Better Plaza. There's the Orchard apartments that are also going in. They're basically the city pays nonprofits to basically they collect money from the city, from the state, from different organizations, and then they redevelop that accordingly. Basically take an existing property and either build new apartments, or they take an old apartment building, refurbish it for seniors, for affordable, basically low-income people, depending upon what the project is. So they take traffic mitigation fees are also there. So basically for every trip, every person that's working on site and the number of trips that they're doing, the city takes traffic mitigation fees. There's a sense of place fee. So the city does take a good number of fees. Whether or not they're as much as they should be, that's questionable. They do keep increasing, they do keep trying to increase that, as opposed to some cities, they just take kind of one chunk and they base it upon the square footage of the property. We basically take it in a lot of different ways. So we basically say, okay, this will go into the Affordable Housing Fund, this will go into the Traffic Mitigation Fund, this will go into the Sense of Place. So it's slightly different the way the city structures how they pull in those fees, and ultimately ahead of time they figure, as opposed to putting it into a general fund like some cities do, they basically pre-allocate it to, okay, based upon the square footage of this or the number of people on the site, they will put it into kind of different bids.
So the $17 that he was talking about is only one piece of it?
It's
or
only
one piece.
It's only one piece of it, and so that's
I just
the
want to
critical.
make sure that everybody's clear about that.
No, so that is correct. So it is one portion. So the city, are they taking enough fees? I don't think so. Same thing as like, I heard the same thing as John said. From the below market standpoint, when I push back on city staff that it's like the below market rate should be increased from 12.5% to 15%. Similarly, developers won't build here. We know developers will continue to build, but there is kind of the average of how much are we taking, and we do keep increasing those fees. How far you want to push that? They're already, the city's trying to do what at least they think is best as far as trying to break it up and look at on a project by project basis how big it is, how many people are there, and then take a different portion of those funds, take different fees in and then apply those funds to what the city thinks is best. So
Environmental impact?
so that's basically the traffic, so the
That's
traffic
what I'm talking
integration.
Do they do an environmental impact study that gives them some facts
Right.
about how to
So it
assess?
depends on, so being on the planning commission, you learn about the environmental impact reports. So there's a whole EIR process, which it depends upon how big that project is. So if it's a smaller project, definitely it's like if it's a duplex of a few units, you don't get an EIR report. When you're building a big office park, when you're building, a large office building or several office buildings, then you get an EIR report. And how, depending on how big the housing is. So it's like the housing that was at the corner of Fair Oaks and Waddell,
That's
that
not-
required an EIR.
That's what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So it depends on the size of the project.
Okay.
Hopefully I answered that question.
So my overriding theme is to try to be innovative, creative, and look at things in a different way. I think that part of the issue is that we're computing these fees, trying to be both competitive and trying to guess at what the costs are, project and guess what the costs are going to be longer term. And we're loading those up front, often with the land developer, not necessarily the tenant or the eventual owner of the property, right? And so we have, I think, we're not really providing ongoing pressure for whoever's going to be there to keep trying to improve, to keep trying to find new opportunities that they might come up with 5 or 10 years later even, right? It's all like, well, we paid, I think the attitude seems like, well, we paid for this, and so now we don't have to worry about it. It's not our responsibility. We don't need to, as a company or group or whatever, donate anymore because we paid a huge chunk, what we feel like might be a huge chunk of money up front. And so it seems to me that we could have some interesting strategies like potentially raising the fees quite a bit, but allowing them to be resolved partially in other ways to get it back down to a competitive level. But if the companies or the eventual tenants or whatever it is don't follow through, then the full fee ends up getting charged, right? So that way the city doesn't come up short, but it allows everybody involved to be creative. So for instance, if they were to fund a really nice shuttle service, if they were to come up with other things like that that we haven't even thought about, that's the kind of thing that I think would help. It also seems like for some of these developments, we could have considered much more strong, maybe had incentives to have more mixed use, more retail, more housing. There's obviously issues both ways, but Moffett Park, that area is huge, right? It could have supported some high density housing in there, at least for some of the people who are working there or something like that, right? There should be a hotel in there. We should really look at the overall situation and try to optimize it. So that's where I would go.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions? Anybody? Yes.
So, you've all come up with some good ideas and talked about things you'd like to do. Only one of you are going to get on the council. What committees would you recommend each of your opponents to be on? So we'll just ask each one of them. Which committees would you feel comfortable having each of your opponents serve on?
Okay, who would you like to answer that?
I'd like each of them in order. So go ahead, John.
Do you want to go left and right?
Oh yeah, I was going to say that.
Sorry, I don't have to take it away from you, but you want to be first every time.
Well, so I mentioned the idea of having a transportation authority, just a citywide one. I mentioned, and John mentioned it, you might have mentioned it. I'm sure we all agree, we kind of got to know each other and we overlap a fair amount. I think that it should be done not necessarily in a mode to take away things from UTA, but to be an overlay, to handle things that they wouldn't do for us that we have an opportunity to do. So I think that is a pretty important committee along with land use and BPAC, the bicycle pedestrian, that's also pretty good. So these guys have a lot of experience on those committees, so I would say that John's been on BPAC and you've been on the land use. I think that both of them would be good on the transportation committee also, and it kind of overlaps, I think, right? It intersects with the land use and all of that, but it needs to be looked at a little bit more holistically, right?
Sure. Okay. So as far as what commissions or committees that my opponent should be placed on, John, if I win, I think John has already been very active as far as the Bicycle Pedestrian and Advocacy Commission. So the BPAC is where he's been for the last 2 years and currently vice chair. Currently vice chair. And so, definitely, I think he has the experience as far as, working on that, especially with the bicycle plan, the way, working on the bike plan going forward. And actually, Stephen, I think that's actually a good commission for you also. I think that especially hearing your issues as far as, the bike, basically your bike trail and using the east channel and the west channel, you're biking here tonight, it makes total sense. And then kind of just from a selfish standpoint, I suggest everybody out there actually looking at applying to a commission in the city. The city runs on people volunteering their time. And so it's like I've been on the planning commission. Ultimately, I was on for 6.5 years and got 2.5 years ago, I got back on the planning commission again. I tried to be on BPAC at one point, but there's a lot of value with that, and there's a lot of different commissions out there. So if you're interested in art, if you're interested in history, there's a lot of other commissions that aren't a big portion of your time at the end of the day. A lot of them only meet once a month. So you can give back to your community, you can meet like-minded people, and you can also give recommendations to city staff, city council on your area of expertise. And even if you're not an expert, it's important that if you just have an interest there, you can grow into that position. It's like when I got on planning commission, I threw my hat in the ring because it's like, I thought, the planning commission was a well-run meeting. Laura Babcock was the chair at that time. And I was, attending the council meetings and the planning commission meetings because I was interested in downtown and what was being decided there. But it seemed to be logical. It seemed to be, I'm an engineer. My background is in engineering and, computer engineering, computer science. And it seemed like a very logical thing from a planning standpoint. You look at a project and you kind of tear it apart and you kind of break it down into its little bits. And so from that standpoint, I just kind of threw my hat in the ring and interviewed well and ended up getting on there. Didn't have any real land use experience other than I owned a home, but that's not really directly applicable. But you have an interest and you can grow into that. So if you have, the staff is always looking for new people to apply. They're constantly going through every 3 months pretty much a application period for the different commissions on the city in the city. And then if you don't feel like city commissions, there's multiple nonprofits out there to give your time to. So I just take my little push there.
What do you think about creating a transportation committee?
I think it's a good option. I don't know if it's a permanent commission or a part-time committee, because there is some overlap with sustainability commission, and so there is some overlap there, and it's whether or not how much of that overlap is it a one-time committee to get the ideas out there, and then basically it's enveloped into another committee. I'm not sure, but as far as what the commissions are right now, that's since it's a nice proposal, but we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Hi, it was nice to go last because it gave me a chance to think about where I think these guys should. For starters, I am in favor of some sort of a transit or transportation committee, and I actually see BPAC and sustainability kind of getting sucked into that. I mean, if you have a transit committee, that to me is the BPAC could be a subset of that. BPAC is not the first commission I tried to get on. I tried to get on the sustainability. I tried to get on the planning commission a few times. So, there are lots of opportunities. Don't be disappointed if you apply and you don't get on the first time. Thinking about other committees these gentlemen could be on in addition to the Transportation Committee. Larry lived in a Heritage District house, so it would be good if he was on the Heritage Committee. And Stephen obviously would be a good fit on the Bicycle Pedestrian Commission, since he talks a lot about and seems very passionate like me about how we create better bike facilities and better walking routes. And I think all of us are trying to figure out how do we connect Sunnyvale better so people can get around without a car.
Anyone else would like to ask a question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, on the issue of rent stabilization, I'm sorry I didn't get Larry and Steve's talk about it. John did speak about it. But for each of you, I have specific questions. For John, I heard your speech, and what I want to know is City Council has tabled the measure until January. What would you do to bring it up at an earlier time? For Larry, I would like to know what your stands are on. And for Steve, I have a question of if you are a resident, would you or would you not have to recuse yourself from any issues regarding rent stabilization because it would directly affect you as an individual?
No, it's okay. I mean, the questions are different. I know. So it failed 6-1 when the city voted on putting it on this agenda. So if I get on council, then it would be 5-2. Which would get it on the agenda. So it could possibly be pulled up. Obviously, I would like to work with the residents. You have to show up to the city council meeting and keep the pressure on, right? You go to every city council meeting, or somebody, one or two people, every public comment period at the beginning of the meeting, you take your 3 minutes, say, when are we going to get the rent stabilization discussion going? When are we going to get the rent stabilization going discussion? We've got to, it takes grassroots, right? The citizens have to rise up and push the city council to do what you need. But I'm willing to bring it up for a vote if I'm elected.
Sure. So as far as rent stabilization, definitely I'm for it, specifically for mobile home parks. I was here back in March when the mayor was here, hearing the stories, and they were very touching stories. One of your residents came to me last year when the Carlisle group first purchased it, like, oh, they're going to convert it over, and I'm like, no, the city has a requirement of the 400 acres, and so it basically will keep the mobile home parks kind of stable, especially the larger ones, because they can't convert those over easily. But from a rent stabilization standpoint, that was one of the biggest issues that I said was there's nothing to keep them from raising the rents, and ultimately, as time passed, they ultimately did that. I'm for rent stabilization for mobile home parks. As I told multiple residents here after the study session, a month and a half ago, I don't think that there's a will of the council to get anything done anytime soon. So if you're interested in moving that forward, the best thing to do is get it on the ballot. And I know that takes time, and I know that you would be affected in the interim. But as we talked about, it's a 5-1 vote, to get things on the ballot. A second person doesn't really to get things on the agenda, but from a council standpoint, you're kind of seeing the will of the council right now. You already, if you attended that meeting, you kind of saw the direction from the council the way it currently stands. Sure. And one additional council member up there or two isn't going to make a big difference in any short term. And it's time, it's like it affects you. And so if you want to build that community, if you want to handle that problem and figure it out, because councils, in other cities have implemented it, and sometimes they've implemented incorrectly. and it's been overturned legally. And you know, there's a lot of issues that you know that it becomes more of a council issue and it becomes a fight. You know, it's like from a standpoint of the residents getting together, you know, the residents in different mobile home parks getting together, conceivably with maybe apartment renters to come up with an overall view of what they want from rent stabilization. Maybe that's the best way, but I don't see, you know, my personal views, and yes, it would help, you know, having another person up there who understands the issues. It's like my parents, you know, were living in a mobile home park in Arizona, and you know, I understand, you know, the concept of living on a fixed income and having basically a management that isn't listening to the residents. And a lot of your issues all really come down to your management. You know, it's like there's a lot of mobile home communities here that are providing leases to their residents, and that's one of the biggest issues. It's like if you had any vision, and I know that there's now issues because they've raised rents for new people coming in, and you know there's bigger issues here because the way the management has dealt with the existing people and new people coming in that aren't, you know, as much as you reach out to people in other communities, there are some very well-run mobile home communities here too, where the management is keeping fixed rates, is saying that we will only raise your rents, giving you a lease that says we will only raise your rent 3% on a yearly basis. That in itself gets rid of the fear and uncertainty and the worry that you know, we don't know what next year is going to look like. We can't plan ahead. And so yes, you have a big issue, and I'm hoping that you know, reaching out to other mobile home communities, you might be able to get the petition together, and I think that's feasible because it doesn't really take that many signatures to get things on the ballot. But I think that's an important step to see how much underground, you know, how much community backing can you get for this issue. And as people hear your stories, and as you talk about what the Carlisle group has done here, that in itself will get a more positive feedback. The other concept is taking it more public, making the issue public within the community puts pressure on the Carlisle group that they need to be more reactive ultimately. And so they need to deal with some of the issues here that I keep hearing about in talking to you. So, you know, ultimately I'm for it, and go ahead and ask.
Well, it's sort of
Sure.
in your same bracket.
Sure.
I went to the meeting,
Sorry.
and at the meeting we heard everything everybody else heard. Came back home and turned on channel 15 and saw the mayor, they brought it up, and Pat said he wanted to do it within a month, and the mayor said no. But here's what I found very interesting. There was 2 or 3 guys on the left, I mean on the right, down there on the right side, or left side, whatever it was on my TV. And they said they wanted to go forward with it. And finally the mayor came back and said, we're not going to do it right now, but I would like January, but he kept saying but.
Well,
he goes, maybe we'll do it before the end, we'll do it in a few months, as long as if people really need to keep pressuring us, then we'll do something quicker. So what my comment to you was, whoever one of you wins, are you and Pat, I guess that would be him too, are you guys going to put pressure on the mayor, because it sounds like a couple of the other people are all for doing something immediately and they don't want to wait till next year.
Right.
So are you guys, how much pressure will you put on them?
Sure. So I think there's 2 things.
Thank you.
First, so one of the reasons why they couldn't do anything that night is everything needs to be agendized. So from a council standpoint, there's basically a process that needs to be followed, that anything that goes on the agenda, anything that they discuss, needs to be part of the agenda and publicized at least 3 days before that meeting. And so one of the reasons why it couldn't be really talked about in any given way during that meeting was, yes, it was part of a study session, but when you go into the actual public deliberations of the meeting, they can't just bring up an issue and say, we're going to deal with this on this evening. So that's one of the issues. I was busy talking to multiple people outside, so I don't know everything that was said during that meeting. But definitely, and one of the issues of dealing with the council is trying to get consensus on issues. So I've worked on the planning commission. I understand it's hard to get sometimes everybody to agree to the same thing. It's not just Pat by himself or two people. It's trying to work on that consensus. I'm hoping that getting more like-minded people. So I don't know. I'm assuming it must have been Jim Davis, might have been the other person. But anyway, it's from a process standpoint. I'll go back and look at the tapes. But
it was Jim and Griffiths. Is that her name? The woman?
No,
Tara.
So there was a lot of hope at that point because it's like they need somebody else, and I think as long as we keep, maybe we need to go down there the same night whoever wins and put a lot of pressure, because I found out in life, I found this out a long time ago, pressure gets things done. If you don't pressure, nothing gets done.
And I agree with that. It's whether or not things get moved forward.
Okay.
Just to clarify this one thing, I spoke to the mayor. The mayor said every council meeting, 1 or 2 people show up and tell them we need rent stabilization. I'm going to the next meeting because I have to make the mayor understand there's a difference between rent control and rent stabilization, and he doesn't have that concept put in his head yet. He doesn't. He keeps telling me rent control. I said, no, rent stabilization. And he says, it's the same thing. No, it's not. I even looked it up online. So, anyway, that's what you need to do. Send 1 email. Somebody else send 1 or 2 emails a week to the council people. Bump the you-know-what out of them. And let them know that we're not going to take this laying down.
So before I answer that question, I'm going to point out that on my Innovate Sunnyvale site, I'm planning to put together basically a Q&A board where people can put out points and questions and discuss them and upvote them and downvote them. It's done all the time in software development. That's how we figure out what's good and bad and get things done. So I think we need something like this. I mean, Nextdoor is nice, but it's by design, it's very parochial, right? It's just the nearby neighborhoods. We need something Sunnyvale-wide that we can start talking about some of these things. And I think if there's 10,000 upvotes for something, it will get people's attention, right? So I think that'll help. To answer your question about recusal, I think that there's a threshold, and it depends on the specifics. First of all, I'm not in PDR, I'm in Casa de Amigos. I'm not in an imminent danger. I assume that it's coming in the future of this kind of issue. I'm sure that the city council does things that affect landowners. People use a library, that use downtown, that use restaurants, and I'm sure that they don't all recuse themselves when there's any possible connection, right? So I think that it needs to be fairly direct and fairly plausible to be some kind of an issue, right? And that kind of impact wouldn't be imminent for me, and it wouldn't be substantial to be, something that I think rises to that level. Worst case would be that I would be able to discuss, advocate, perhaps talk to staff and trigger other kinds of research and looking into things. Worst case is I would just recuse myself from a particular vote on something, right? But you still are involved. You're still part of the whole process. I don't think that really applies in this case, but it could potentially become an issue at some point.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
To both points, actually. And to back up what Marcia is saying, I am going each council meeting and raise the issue. Not getting a response, but there's another meeting coming up soon. And I've heard from from a council member that even discussion is not allowed, and I think that was and posted on Nextdoor, and I think that has to be a misinterpretation of this, because it means that a council member is not able to represent the people who voted for him. And I do believe even in the voting process, yes, I'll face maybe a $75 or $100 increase. I don't think that puts me in such a tight picture as opposed to when members receive large contributions to campaign funds and still are able to vote on projects. So I don't think people should be concerned about council members from a park such as this or any other park not being able to vote and not being able to discuss the issues. And that's something maybe whoever is on the council can clarify that before the November election and have that cleared.
Doesn't it have more to do with financial gain? I mean, if you're personally gonna financially gain as a council person from a decision you're making, that's when you get into that ethics.
Let me talk about that for just a moment, just kind of on that note. So thinking through it, so I had to recuse myself on a portion of the downtown project recently. So I could deal with kind of the use permit and how that project is moving forward, but the developer wanted to change the initial vision as far as condos into apartment rental. So they wanted the option to make them into apartments, mainly because they didn't want 198 people who own their property to have to be negotiated with when they deal with phase 2. So phase 1 was done, but phase 2, as they start talking about what they want to do, they didn't want 198 other voices to sign off on every little thing that was being done. So they wanted the option to say, okay, for all the first units, we want to convert them from condos into apartments, so that the apartment owner would basically be able to say, I waive all the rights, I want to move, I want to help the decision on phase 2. I had to recuse myself. I was actually beyond the 1,000, so the state has certain rules as far as how far you are from a specific property, and I was beyond the 1,000 foot, but there was still the concept that changing how that land is being used, as opposed to, we know that the downtown is there, but changing it from condo into apartment could conceivably affect the value of my property. I had to recuse myself. So the city attorney of the state said, you should not, you can't be part of that vote, ultimately. I'm actually not sure, because when you're talking about basically conceivably zoning of the land that you're living on, whether or not you would have to recuse yourself from those votes. So keep that in mind. I'm not an expert, and the state decides those sorts of issues ultimately. You basically, city staff takes it to state to have them decide, because there was issues about the El Camino. So El Camino, when the El Camino specific plan, it didn't change the zoning of those properties. And if you look at El Camino, that covers, if you go 1,000 feet on every direction, that covers more than a third of our city. And so it's one thing when you're kind of changing the zoning or the effects of the zoning of the property that you live on. It's different when, it's like you're trying to deal with a citywide issue. But I'm not 100% positive that you wouldn't have to recuse yourself on those specific issues. And it's not for me to decide, it's not for the city to decide, it's for the state to decide whether or not you basically have to step down from your city council vote when that final decision is being made. So, I'm not 100% positive, something that you could ask city staff about. But
Who at the state level then, is that the fair?
PPC. Yeah.
Okay.
And they make those decisions, and they've, it used to be 300 feet, and then they extended it to 1,000 feet.
I thought it was 5. It's not 5.
It's 5. It's 1,000. And well, there's different levels depending upon how close you are. And then they basically kind of put in a catch-all of, do you have any fiscal, do you have any fiscal impact or basically would it affect the value of your land positively or negatively?
But here you're not an owner, you're a renter.
I understand, but if you're deciding on where, your rent stabilization
Right.
on a park where you're living, you're basically making a decision on your property. So,
You said
and so I'm not sure. And I'm not the expert, but I do think that there might be an issue there.
So worst case scenario, you just have to be prepared to move out. So, you know, if you say, I'm a city council member and I'm voting on this, but I live in the park.
Airbnb is.
Then I move out of the park and I can act as a city council.
Absolutely. Yep, if you have no direct impact on that, absolutely. Anyway,
Well, okay, go back to financial. But the initial question had to do with financial gain from voting for. And you didn't address that one. Like, a contractor comes in, wants to build a big complex,
Yeah.
makes a big contribution to your campaign, and then you vote it through.
yeah. So,
Is that a conflict?
I think, you know, if it's a large amount of money, I do think that there's a conflict of interest there. I do have the Sunpack, you know, endorsement, which was $2,500. I get the Silvar endorsement just recently, and they say the check's in the mail, they're also another $2,500. It's not, you know, from my standpoint, I collect, you know, I keep collecting, you know, $100, $400, it's like, it's money, and a campaign is really expensive.
And I'm not
but-
being specific to
Yeah.
you, I'm talking about the council members who vote on big projects. I'm thinking specifically of the
So-
one that passed the night we were there, the big complex that's going in out there. CalPERS financed that whole thing, and I understand all city people are insured by CalPERS. Would that be a conflict of interest?
So, I'll be honest, you know, and I'll be honest.
Asking for a legal opinion.
Right. I'll be honest as far as the city council is concerned. You know, I think they're honest. I don't think that they, you know, basically are making the decisions about who gives them money. I do think that staff makes it easy for them to say yes. So pretty much, you know, you look at most projects, they say yes on it. Doesn't matter, you know, it's not like, oh, this specific developer or that specific developer or Sunpack or whatever came through. Staff's job is to kind of keep things moving through the system. And as much as, okay, they gave a lot of money to certain council members that are up there, I don't think that they go overboard on you know, bending towards a specific development. I think in my mind that to a large degree, the majority of the council says yes, because staff has said,
Yes.
this is why the project needs to be approved, and here's all the reasoning. You know, from a planning commission standpoint, I've said, you know, we've made recommendations to say no, and when it goes on to council, the recommendation is still yes, with the comment of, well, the planning commission raised these issues, but staff still says yes. And it's the most expedient thing for council to do, and it's the easiest thing for them to do, to not say no, because they have all the reasoning. The staff report is written to say yes. Now, whether or not that's giving a specific developer a special privilege, you know, I've met with developers, I've met with neighbors, you know, say, I'm constantly doing that, you know, from a planning commission standpoint. I'm getting extra feedback, I'm getting extra information as well as getting them extra feedback that if you wait until a planning commission standpoint, it's sometimes too late, especially with the concept of we make a recommendation, it goes on to council, and they say yes anyway. If I can say, you need to fix this. I met with a developer this morning on a new hotel that's going on in Matilda, and we met with him on the study session from planning about 3 months ago, and I saw the latest plans this morning, and I'm like, you need to add curves here, you need to add, you know, architecturally, it's still really boxy. And by the time it comes in front of the planning commission at the end of the year, they'll have fixed that. And so that there is that importance to have that interplay. You know, although, you know, being on the planning commission, I've had people say, oh, you're in the developer's pockets, you know, you're doing this, and it's like we get paid nothing, you know. We don't, you know, there's no benefit, you know. They offered to buy me breakfast, and I'm like, no, I bought my own coffee. It's like, you can have breakfast here, I have my coffee, don't worry. But it's that sort of thing. It's the appearance of you know, being upright, but also it's like to have no interaction is just as bad. Not to be able to, you know, to only talk to the neighbors, not to talk to the developer means that you don't, you know, you can't say this is really bad, because once you go in the dais, you can't really, it's too late. You know, staff has already went through all this process, and your other council members or your other planning commissioners conceivably, but your other council members will probably vote yes to approve a project at the end of the day. And if you get that change in, you have to get it in early. So I do think that there's a slight conflict, but I really don't think that there is a real conflict of interest there from a money standpoint.
I want to toss in my comments on this topic because the clarity is so important, right? One of the things I stated up at the beginning is I'm refusing any developer campaign contributions. So to make that clear, right? There's so much bad press out there that council members are on the take, and it really is upsetting because most of them aren't trying to be. Most of them were limiting how much they were taking to 10% of what they were raising, and that was their comfort point. Where they said, I feel I can comfortably come to you, the voter, and say, you know, even though I took $3,000 from this guy, I spent $30,000, right? So do you really think he bought my vote with $3K? But I'm not taking any this time, so trying to make that really clear. And yes, staff has a tendency to push things along. I mean, too many times I've gone to a council meeting or a planning commission meeting and say, you know, this needs to be changed. And they're like, we put too much work into this already, right? The developer's been at it for a year. You know, it's too late to change it. So again, one of the things that I have initiated, and it's great now, you can sign up to get on the development project listserv, and anytime any new project gets started, the first time the guy files papers, you can get notified that it's coming. So now this is a standard report. You know, even though it may be 3 years before this comes before a vote, you can know that project's coming down your street, right? And you can get a gauge. I've had at least 3 community meetings with plans for buildings that were long before they went to the planning commission. They came to my neighborhood association and said, "This is what we're thinking about doing. What do you guys think?" You know, and that's actually required for them to do public outreach meetings. But you know, this is where people get involved a lot earlier. The earlier you can talk to the developer, the easier it is for him to change something. The closer you get to the planning commission or the city council, the way more expensive it gets for him to change anything. So he's going to be much more resistant. So if you really want to change anything, you got to get into it early. And people are much more accommodating. And hopefully that also addresses the ethics concern about money and financing and these things. One of the things that Larry and I think Stephen all agree on is we would all be in favor of public financing of campaigns, right? This idea that we have to go out and raise $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to be able to communicate to you our positions is a real killer for us as people.
Anyone else?
I did want to add. I want to add 2 things. I agree with that, and I also think that we should try to make the campaigns more electronic, more efficient, rather than spending a huge amount of money. I'm going to email everybody I can email, but only 13,500 of Sunnyvale residents have their email address in their Santa Clara County voter registration, right? So that's all I have, without spending money or doing research or potentially accidentally emailing people that aren't in Sunnyvale or something. The other thing I was going to point out on the rent stabilization and this whole issue is one of the things that I've started pointing out, and I think it's something that should really be stressed and kind of looked at maybe as a particular paradigm, is that the issue here is not just, a lot of people want to equate it to, even when you say that it's rent stabilization, people think apartments, they think, kind of a typical situation where you don't have so much at stake. And I think we should just keep stressing and almost come up with some maybe specific phrase about it to point out that this is really a balance of equity, right? You have the landowner equity and you have the homeowner equity involved, right? And it's really, the homeowner equity is really pretty much completely at risk and unprotected and at the mercy of this other equity. And it's not the same as an apartment. It's not like you can just move out and get another apartment and there's competition and whatever. It's like you've got momentum and it's very difficult to move. It's essentially practically impossible to move, right? So I think we really keep talking about this balance of equity and the fact that it's not a balance of equities in the sense that you're exposed. That
You have to break in, the law says that you can be moved to 100 miles away, but you should be close enough to go to work. That's what the Sunnyvale thing is.
The
so
whole
that's
conversion ordinance is really badly
It's
written.
terrible.
I've been
Right,
doing this
right.
for
So-
years.
So we should focus on that, on fixing that. We should focus on other possible legal theories, right? There are some catch-alls that conceivably could apply, right? Unfair business practices and other things that, looked at in the right way, argued the right way, might be useful. So.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Real quick, why is it some cities have rent control and some don't, like Sunnyvale? I mean, how come it's so hard for Sunnyvale not to have rent control?
You know, ignorance.
Yeah, well, we can all take a quick answer to that, because it's history.
Yeah.
For starters, Sunnyvale, through most of its existence, has way more homeowners than renters. So renters were a very small percentage of the people, so they didn't have a lot of clout. And renters typically weren't often voters. So again, they had even less clout. And there was plenty of apartments. There was plenty of apartments all up and down the peninsula. So for all those reasons, I don't think there was ever an impetus before to make the council pay attention to do rent stabilization. In the places where you've seen it already in existence, right, it's, cost of living is very high, housing is very short, San Francisco, Berkeley, right? It always starts from the density problem. When things get in short supply, that's when the rates can go shooting up, and that's when stabilization comes in to keep people, protect people in their homes. That's my answer.
Sure. So from a city standpoint, you know, it's like, you see it a lot more recently, but we did have a rent stabilization proposition back in '93.
Rent control.
Rent control, sorry. I should be-
There's a difference.
Yeah. Although I think rent stabilization would supersede over
Rent stabilization is a span.
Yeah.
Rent control is one flat fee, can never change.
Exactly.
Right. And I think it's ultimately, you know, it's like you're seeing the councils and different communities are now taking this more into consideration as it's a supply and demand issue within the region. Ultimately, you know, it's like depending upon where you are in the country, it's how much that ultimately is an issue. It's like there are always bad owners for apartments, for mobile home parks that will go far beyond what the market allows. But if those people have options to move elsewhere, then it's not a problem. But now it's become a problem. Hang on, Steve.
So I would say, yeah, there's historical reasons, and you know, a lot of the existing momentum makes it tough. I think that I think there's opportunities to not only explore the rent stabilization, but to find creative options and pressures. So it could be carrots, it could be sticks, right? It could be like, you know, maybe there's some way to increase density here in some way. Maybe there's some way to add retail on the edge of the property or something. You know, there's the developer, the new owners want to make money, but they don't necessarily have to make money.
Excuse me, they don't need to make money.
Well,
Carlisle has more
no.
money than God.
What I mean to say is they're driven to make money, but they don't necessarily need to make money in one particular way that is the most regressive for the people living here. So my point is, they're interested in making money. They invested here to make money, but they don't have to make money by raising your rent if there's other interesting options that end up being mutually beneficial. Now you have to all talk about whether those are mutually beneficial options, whether they exist. But I think that possible alternatives to things like rent stabilization are to look for some creative alternatives where where the city council or the residents can put pressure on them to explore those options that maybe are mutually beneficial to everybody.
And an educated person you want to represent you on city council, please vote for John Cordes on August 16th if you haven't already voted by mail, and again on November 8th.
Thank you. My name is Larry Klein. You know, I've been very active in the city for many, many years. I feel I have the wealth of experience to run, if I'm elected to run for city council, to immediately hit the ground running and represent all of the city. I've got a lot of the endorsements of the people within the community, past council members, current council members, community leaders. I got the endorsement of the San Jose Mercury News this morning. People feel that, you know, it's that wealth of experience that's critical to understanding both the issues and how to best change the city to make it a little bit better. And I hope I have your vote. Thank you very much.
Steve Williams, this is my neighborhood basically, and I think I have a lot of creative ideas. You can see on your flyers there, that's like 22 different ideas that I think are quite interesting for us to pursue, and some of them are, I think, really important to go after. And so, you know, I'm an engineer, I'm a problem solver, so when I figure out, you know, identify a problem and find a solution, I'm a bulldog in driving towards making it happen, and whether it's legal or personal or finding out what people are interested in and going for that. I have done that professionally and for the federal government and other places for over 30 years. So I have a lot of experience with dealing with people and solving problems and working my way through those issues. So I definitely identify with you guys in particular, but really the whole city. I think that Sunnyvale is wonderful, and there's a lot that we can do to really improve the whole city. So you vote for me, it would be very, very helpful. Thanks.